Election interference has been a huge talking point over the past several years, but there's one landscape that's been largely overlooked: the Canadian news media space. Ladies and gents, welcome back. With all the talks of who may or may not be interfering with the Canadian electoral system, one entity or several entities that have been largely overlooked or have been flying under the radar the entire time are, well, CBC and all the other news outlets in the mainstream media. That's right. I put this post out there yesterday. There is clear conflict of interest in allowing them to cover this election. One candidate promises to increase their budget, and the other promises to remove all of their funding. The fact that they're still able to broadcast, host debates, and choose who runs ads and when is a slap to the face of election integrity. This is obvious when you look at where their real interests lie, and they're not shy about even talking about it. Here's the CBC talking about this right here.
Poilievre is also planning cuts to be able to afford his plan. First, he intends to defund the CBC, something he has long promised. He's also promised increasing cuts to government consultants, saving up to $10 billion. And he would end what he calls foreign aid to, quote, dictators, terrorists, and global bureaucracy by up to $3 billion. It's not clear who exactly that would affect.
Well, it's clear who's on the top of the list for the CBC. That's right. The CBC is on the top of the list for the CBC. But it's not just the CBC, but many other outlets in the Canadian media landscape that are getting government money. And when you get government money, it really calls into question where your loyalties lie. And is the truth, is the news really what is most important to you, or is it maintaining that funding? Now, there's been several articles written about this recently, and I love showcasing this. And this is not by, of course, it's not by CBC. It's not by any of the big players in the media space. No, here we have it from reformmediaperspective.ca. Millions distributed to Canada's legacy media during election campaign. This should be, I mean, this is unheard of. This is just crazy. I mean, except for banana republics or perhaps the old Soviet Union when Pravda was the name of the game. While the media was covering the federal election, the newly formed Canadian Journalism Collective, that's right, the CJC, started its first handouts of cash from the enormous pot of $100 million that is now mandated to give to the Canadian news outlets each year. This is the payola that they got from putting in new legislation. The funding comes from the money that Google was required to pay in order to comply with the Liberal government's Bill C-18, the Online News Act, which was, of course, it was a crackdown. It was the mafioso. Hey, you got a lovely news outlet there. You got a lovely search engine. It would be a shame if we shut it down in Canada. Give us money, which passed through Parliament in 2023. As revenue has dwindled for the legacy media, the Liberal government has been very motivated to step in with their own funding, both directly and indirectly. In addition to its $1.4 billion in annual funding of the CBC, it provided about $885 million, so close to another $1 billion of other media handouts in the past 5 years. The Hub, a relatively new media organization which doesn't support the government funding, reached out to Canada's largest legacy media companies to ask if they've received any of this money. However, how much they got and whether they would be willing to disclose this information during the election campaign. None of the organizations would commit to this. Oh, shock. Why wouldn't they admit to this? Why does this matter? Can we serve two masters is the question. If the media is supposed to be the servant of the public, holding the government to account, it can't also be in the employ of that government. This is where you get conflicts of interest. And this is why the news media should largely sit this election out. I think any anything that's coming from these news organizations is advocacy for the current government, because, well, the government that might come in and replace them would shut down all of this funding. So, I mean, the conflict of interest is very clear. It's very clear, but it's going to continue as long as the Liberals are in power, in which all of these news agencies are going to advocate for. So they've become lobby groups for the current government by default, by de facto. And this is, it's unfortunate, but it's where it is. MLI reporting, government subsidies for Canada's media were supposed to be temporary, but they kept on growing and could be here to stay. That's right. Just like Milton Friedman said, you know, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government solution. Of course, the solution here is keeping the government in power. Exactly. That's where they're going with this. Now, amid this obvious conflict of interest, should I start there? Yeah. Amid this obvious conflict of interest, this deep dive seeks to do two things. First, it catalogs the myriad government policies that directly or indirectly subsidize private news outlets in Canada. Second, it explores how News Media Canada, the industry's main advocacy group, has publicly asked for increases in government support over the last several years, including on the eve of the election. Wow. Give me more money just before you want to be, you're going to be either voted in or voted out. This is really, again, a conflict of interest. The advocacy has succeeded as temporary programs have become permanent and federally mandated funds for journalism have expanded. However, it has become an enormous cost to journalistic objectivity and independence. Wow, what a shock. We have arrived at the scenario many have predicted, with newspapers openly advocating for preferential treatment, praising the governments that fund them and failing to disclose their entitlements. I'd go even further and actively campaigning against the new government that may cut their funding. This is where they're at. Now, Cat Canada posted this. This is Laurie Ann Kempton, and she was giving examples and tips on how to spot disinformation. She says, verify by checking what most experts are saying. Where are the experts? Well, I'm sure they're going to be in the news media, but here's some tips on how to make sure you're not being manipulated.
As spotting instances of information manipulation can be difficult, we want to discuss some of the things to watch out for.
Content can be questionable if it provokes an emotional response, particularly with negative or frightening claims, or with bold or extreme statements on a controversial issue.
Where do we ever hear those things? I don't know, perhaps in the main media news coverage of all this stuff. Who are the people that we're against? Anyway, she says content is questionable if it provokes feelings, if it sounds negative or scary, or if it contains words that causes you to clickbait. Get out there. I mean, clickbait is everywhere, no matter where you look, but clickbait's a thing. But what is this emotional, negative, very negative sounding stuff, provoking feelings, causing you maybe to do a thing or two? Well, how about the CBC's own coverage? Here they are talking about the debates and what was happening at the scrum of the debates. You remember when the second day they canceled them. Well, why did they have to cancel them? Well, let's hear what they have to say.
Then the leader spoke post-debate in those scrums. What did you hear from those scrums?
The post-debate scrums were dominated by right-wing media groups who flooded leaders with questions on topics unrelated to the debate. One did ask Carney if he felt Trudeau was a good prime minister. Carney said that he was and that they have shared values, including taking care of Canadians, reconciliation and equality. But
scary. Oh, scary. Everybody out there that disagrees with us is a right-wing fanatic. This is the same kind of thing. How is this not invoking feelings, provoking feelings, sounding negative or scary? Who's the fake news? Come on. At the end of the day, this is where we're at. Now, honestly, I want to ask this honest question. Do you think that the CBC, the Global News, CTV, all of these big organizations that are either directly funded by the government or indirectly funded or through subsidies, Canadian Press, all of these outlets. How is it that they are not engaging in election interference? They're campaigning for the Liberal Party at this point. This is where we're at. They're actively campaigning against the Conservative Party, it's part of their platform to defund all of these networks. At least defund them from the taxpayers' funding. They can fund themselves on their own, just like any other business would. How is this not a conflict of interest? How is this not election interference at this point? I'd love to leave that one with you guys, and we'll see you tonight. We're going to be doing the live stream, the Friday night live stream. We'll see you there where we catch up on all of these things and give back to the community. Want to hear your voices. So leave a comment in the comment section down below, and if not, we'll see you tonight in the live stream. Everybody, keep on trucking.